Hey everybody, it's Ivan. A friend recommended that I do a video sort of talking about some different Magic frames, what I think works, what doesn't, what could be changed. So I decided to format it like a tier list, and I've got about 30 different card frames that I'd like to go through and just talk a little bit about what I think works, what doesn't, and I'll just rank them. There's no particular order, sort of just going in chronological-ish, so masterpieces, that kind of stuff will be towards the end. So I want to start with the pre-8th edition frame, this original alpha frame. I have an alpha card here, but it changed a couple times, some minor things, but generally it stayed sort of looking like this. I like this one. It's sort of debated between players if this is a good frame or not. I don't think it's the most readable. Like when they updated the 8th edition frame, it got a lot more readable, but it lost some flavor. Like with this frame, each individual color had a slightly different frame. Like with this green card, it has a wood grain texture behind it, and it would be different for each individual color. And there weren't as much nuances like that when it got updated to the 8th edition frame. So I think this is a pretty good standard. I'm going to put this at B. It's not amazing since readability should be a high priority for a trading card game. Then we've got basically the same thing, white border. A lot of people don't like the white border. I'm going to put it at B because I personally like it. The original intention was to have the white border signify a reprint card, which makes it so you can sort them out easier when you're like quick shuffling through your collection, which I think is pretty cool. I don't think the implementation of it was very great, but aesthetically, I think it's pretty cool to have something set out differently to be able to sort it out nicer. So now we have the 8th edition frame. This made the card a lot more readable, a lot more organized, looks more polished, but it loses some flavor. There's these different textures on the border for each color of card, but it's not as dramatic of a difference between different frames as the original one. This one's also pretty good. Like for these generic frames, I'm putting them at B. Now for the M15 frame, they didn't make that many huge changes, but I think the minor tweaks that they did do made it a whole lot more polished. The foil stamp on rares, the thicker border on the bottom for more readable collector's info. They got their own font, just minor changes that make the whole thing a lot more polished. This one I'm going to put at A. It's the overall most clean frame that they've done for the basic cards so far. So I'm just kind of flying through the basic frames, and we'll get to the more interesting ones. Then there's the Planeswalker frame. I think it's pretty nice to have the curved frame instead of the more straighter vertical edges, but the Planeswalker frame has stayed the same basically since Lorwyn, since they originally introduced Planeswalkers. Other than, I think, the addition of the foil stamp, they changed the font a little bit, but it's mostly stayed exactly the same, and I think they could do something a little different, like especially since Dominaria, when they added the legendary header. I feel like, especially since Planeswalkers are legendary, they could at least put the legendary header on them, or even better, make a custom Planeswalker header for Planeswalkers. The Planeswalker frame just doesn't seem as special anymore. Like, the Planeswalker frame originally introduced the thicker black border at the bottom to fit in this stuff and the loyalty and all that, but when they added that to all cards in M15, it just doesn't seem as special anymore. So I think it's due for an update of some sort. It's fine. I'll put it at B, I think, for now. We can always move things around later. The San Diego Comic-Con black promos. I don't know if they're still doing these. I think they've started to do different things for the San Diego promos. I'm pretty sure it's just foiled here on the colored parts, and the other parts aren't foiled, something like that. They're not the most readable, but I don't think that's as important since these aren't as much of a thing to be played with as a collector's item. I really like these. I don't think anyone would argue putting these in the A tier. I'm not going to put them in S because they're not the most readable or playable things, and the mana cost kind of sticks out weirdly. It's not great. Amonkhet, the Aftermath cards. I didn't even remember the thing. Yeah. These aren't great. I'm putting them in F. I don't think anyone would argue that either. It's just, it doesn't work to have the horizontal on the top and then sideways on the bottom. Like, it just doesn't work. As opposed to the fuse cards from Ravnica. These are okay. It's definitely better than the Aftermath cards, but I'm sure everybody who's played in a set with fuse cards knows, like, if you're drafting or you got one of these in your hand and you're trying to hide it, but you want to read it and you don't know what it does and you have to tilt it sideways. I think these would work better if it was similar to the top half of the Aftermath card, just twice. I'm going to put this in C. It's certainly better than the Aftermath frame, but it's not horrible. So flip cards. I like what they do with the art on these. It's definitely interesting to have, instead of two pieces of art, it's like they're kind of melded together. But these are also a mess. Like if you're playing with one, you generally expect to have the text at the bottom, name at the top. So you might try to read that and it's all the info's at the top. It's just confusing. And if you tap it, then it's unclear which way it is. So I'm putting that at F too. Now I'm going to go through a couple of full art basic lands real quick. The Unhinged basic lands, these are great. I think these are some of the best full art basic lands that they've done so far. I'm putting that at an A. I would love to see a new post M15 updated version of that. The Unglued basic lands, these are definitely unique. I really like this stained glass looking lines. It's definitely outdated looking. I don't love how this land and island, the name and type text are just kind of in the middle of nothing. Like it seems fairly arbitrary where they're placed. And also all this empty space in the corners is pretty weird. I think this could be one that could be updated. I might do a sort of my own take on this frame. I don't love these kind of 3D looking elements either. I think these should be flatter to fit with the rest of it, but it's definitely pretty cool. I'm going to go with A just because of the uniqueness of them, even though it's not the most polished thing. It's the first full art land that they did, so I think they get a bit of a pass on that one. And now the recent unstable lands. These ones are fully borderless. They've got nothing on the sides, which I really like. I think a lot of people like these. My only complaint with these is that it feels like there's a lot of empty space down here at the bottom and at the top. In my unstable land inspired frame, I made these thinner at the top and the bottom. I feel like it's too thick on these, but it's still overall a really nice design. This is definitely my favorite full art land frame that they've done so far, so I think I gotta put it at S tier. And then there's the Zendikar frame. I'm kind of lumping this together with the Battle for Zendikar since they're fairly similar. I like the curved frame on the sides. In the Battle for Zendikar ones, it only curves up here and then goes straight down. It's kind of reminiscent of the Planeswalker frame, makes it feel a little more special. Overall, I like these, but they're not anything special compared to the various unset full art land frames that they've done, so I'm going to put this at a B. The Futureshifted Frame, this one's also pretty controversial. I personally really like it. I tend to like more experimental things, and I don't mind the vertical mana cost being on the left. It's definitely not something that most players, they wouldn't expect to see the mana on the left, but personally that's not an issue for me. I definitely like the more unique look of these. I probably will also do my own version of this frame at some point. I did one a couple years ago, but it doesn't hold up as well anymore, so I'll probably be doing something like this in a future video. Overall, this frame, even though it's got its flaws, I'm going to put it at A, just because of how innovative and different it is. The Planeshifted Frame from Planar Chaos. At first look, this one doesn't seem too different from the regular 8th edition frame, but it does have its own completely unique textures in the text box in the background, and then the main difference is the darker type and title lines with the white text. It's not a huge difference. I'm going to put it at the same, at a B. It's not amazingly different. I would have liked if they did something a little bit more different with the frame on that one. Next we got the signature Spellbook. These are pretty cool. I like what they did with this big element at the bottom, and the circular stamp is super cool. Towards the top of the card, I think it gets more messy. This feels very imbalanced and not great. I don't like how there's no solid line on the sides here, and there's that glow effect. And then the art kind of overlaps on this line a little bit. It's not great. It doesn't feel super polished towards the top, but the bottom I feel is really strong. And then having the centered text on shorter cards like this counterspell. And then obviously there's the big difference of the different texture in the back and on the type lines. I think it's cool how the background texture is the same on the type bars, but it's slightly blurred. so it kind of looks like it's a sort of a frosted glass effect. I don't like the uncolored mana symbols, even though all the cards in this set would be blue. I don't remember if there was a colorless card in this set, but I tend to prefer having some sort of color indicator on the mana symbols rather than having it just be the white water symbol. But overall, I really like how innovative they were on this one as well. I'm going to put this at an A. And the signature spellbook for Gideon, I don't like that they kept this top element that I didn't like before. Like, all of my complaints from the last one are still on this one, and the bottom feels pretty messy on this one too. The much thicker lines, I guess, fit with sort of the aesthetic that they're going for, but then it doesn't match with this top bit here. It's just strange. It's all sharp lines down here, and then it's all curved up here. Still feels kind of messy to me, and I don't see the point of this little cutout here. I like this glow effect that's on the text box, these glowing lines, but overall it feels sort of messy. I definitely don't like this one as much as the Jace spellbook, so I'm putting this one at B. I'm going to move things around a little bit. I'm going to move white border down to C and the 8th edition frame down to C. That seems pretty good for the moment. Next one is this new M20 token design. I don't remember if this debuted in M20. I wasn't paying a lot of attention to the spoilers there. I like having the art go all the way up to the black border, but I don't like what they did with these type and title bars as much. The white text is okay. I preferred the old gold text on the older tokens, and I don't really love this gradient darker towards the center. I feel like if they're going to do that, they should make it match to the bottom. And then the bottom here looks like a standard card, but slightly transparent. You can sort of see the art through it. I wish they'd just keep it consistent between the top and bottom bars. And the power and toughness box is a different style from the top two as well. It's just not consistent at all. On the textless cards like this, there's this little sliver of art down here that I think looks really strange. It's not an issue on cards with text, but if they made this type bar like more transparent, and maybe they make it a transparent black and then have the type bar text white, then it would work nicer because the art would go all the way down. But as it stands, there's just this weird little section of art that I don't really like it. I think they should almost just remove this line down here entirely. Maybe have the black border just slope in like that. I don't know. It could definitely be messed with, but I think this is sort of a sloppy solution. I'm going to put this at C. I don't like it as much as the previous token frame. The famous textless cryptic command, the player reward promos. It's a cool frame. Same problem as the Unglued full art land, where it's got all this empty space here. It's okay, not horrible aesthetically, but then there's the whole issue of printing a cryptic command with no text. I think this one's got to go at C. It looks okay, it's just not functional as a card, really. And some of the other cards that were put in that frame weren't as bad, but the cryptic command is the famous example of the cards that should not be textless ever. Here's the game day promo. They've changed this frame around often. I really like these actually. This is a good way to do a full art card. I personally would prefer if for short like one line cards like this, if they make the text box smaller. I think this is smaller than a regular Magic card, but they could have more room for the main frame of the art on most of these. And I sort of would like it if the title bar was transparent with a white title as well. It's okay though. These aren't bad. I'll put these at a B. Now I've got these new promos. I don't actually know what these come from. I wasn't paying too much attention to the M20 stuff. As opposed to the previous promos, I do like how on this one they have the texture on the title, the type bar, and the power and toughness box to all match. Unlike the bad tokens that I was talking about earlier, this is how the token should have been done, really. Is if they're going to change the texture on the title bar, they should do it on the other two matching elements as well. I think that this design in the background of the text box is okay. All white text is nice. This one, in general, I like. I'm going to put these at a B. It's not as good as some of the other promo frames that they've done. Now we're getting to the more interesting things. So the Zendikar Expedition frame. This was the start of the whole Masterpiece series. I think they learned their lesson here from the previous textless promos that got some backlash, so they put the full text for all of these on them. I think they could have gone textless for the shocks and fetches. Everybody knows what those do, but I understand why they kept it. But I do think that they could have gone more transparent on this text box. I think they should have had white text here, get rid of this line, get rid of this whole background and make it sort of like a fade from black at the bottom, something like that. And then there's also this awkward space here of the Hedron looking texture. Again, it's sort of the same issue with those M20 tokens where the slope of this abruptly goes down, sharp angle, and then there's this empty space down here, but they can't really move this down there because the stamp's in the way. So that's always something that I haven't liked about this frame. And then the fact that it's not really full art. Overall, these were super cool when they came out, especially just because they were the start of this whole lottery card thing that they're still doing. These were sweet. I'm going to have to put them at A tier. Not quite S tier, I think. They could have more art for a card that's supposed to be full art, but they're definitely really nice. Now, the Kaladesh Inventions, the official start of the Masterpiece series. These ones are really nice. I like having the frame over here be partially transparent rather than the full, more normal card-looking design of the Expeditions. I don't really have any huge problems with this, and it fits so well flavorfully with the Kaladesh block. I'm going to have to put this at the S tier. The Ixalan not Masterpiece frame. This was supposed to be the Masterpiece for the Ixalan block, but they ended up scrapping it and reusing this for the transform lands. I have a feeling that they would have gone borderless for this. It seems kind of strange having it cut off there and up here. I think if they'd kept this as the Masterpiece, maybe they would have gone fully black borderless, but this feels like an awkward repurposing of it. In their original form, I think these would have been really nice. I definitely like this more innovative frame where they're not sticking to the regular template like the Inventions and the Expeditions did. My only real gripe with this frame is that I think the title bar is a little excessively tall, and then this scroll bit in here where the type goes, having it slightly arced downwards means that it doesn't fit longer types in there as well. Like if you're trying to put a legendary creature in there, it looks strange. So I overall really like this frame, but I would have liked to see what it would have been in its original form before they scrapped the whole Ixalan Masterpiece series. I'm going to put this at A because it's a really nice start, but it doesn't feel finished really. Then we have the highly controversial Amonkhet Invocations. I don't hate these as much as a lot of people do. I definitely have a lot of issues with them, but I was not one to hate on them when we saw the original renders. I honestly didn't think they were real when we saw the first images, but I really like these actually. There's definitely some glaring issues like this big useless thing here. It feels like they're trying to adhere too closely to the 3D elements of this, like this big drop shadow here, the sides of these columns. I don't think it needs to be like an actual 3D object. There's definitely some cuts that can be made. And then, of course, there's the whole issue with the font. That was a huge controversy over it. These little hieroglyphic things, and then even once you decipher where the title is, it's harder to read what it actually says. And then there's the centered all caps text. Both of those things make it harder to read. I don't remember who it was. One of the designers said they were supposed to feel like you're reading hieroglyphics, like you're supposed to decipher it. But for players that have never seen these cards before, like you don't want it to be hard to read them. So I think with some font modifications, some cut downs on the frame, this one could have been a lot nicer. And it also is a pretty weird thing for the supposed full art promos to have smaller art than a regular card. Like these have much thicker borders than a normal card would have. There's definitely changes that could be made. This is similar to the scrapped Ixalan Masterpiece in the way that it's an interesting start, but it doesn't feel finished really. It feels more like a collector's item in its current state and not as much of a magic card that you can play with. I plan on doing my own rendition of this frame sometime in the near future as well, making some changes and seeing what I would have done with this frame. In its current state, I'm going to put it at a B tier. It's really nice aesthetically, but not really readable. Aesthetically alone, I'd put it at an S, but the fact that you can't read the title bar and the type bar is a pretty big issue. Then we've got the Dominaria Sagas. I think the thing I was pointing out on other cards, they did really well here. Instead of having that awkward background space down here, they curved the black border nicely down into there. There's still this awkward little sliver of space. I feel like they almost could have just gone fully black down here, moved the stamp down here, and then moved the type bar down a tiny bit. but it's definitely better than the other ones that I was talking about, the Expedition and the M20 tokens. I definitely like what they did with the bottom. As for the actual frame, I like the stained glass effect on the text box. I like this element. I think it fits really well with the actual mechanics of the card, and having the vertical art on these was a really interesting thing. And even though we're judging the frames here and not the art, the arts on these were amazing. I thought about doing something similar to this for a Planeswalker frame. I think that could be an interesting experiment, so you might see something like that here in the next couple weeks. But as for this frame, I think it fits really well with the mechanic. Nothing super special. I'm just going to put it at a B tier. The extended art Throne of Eldraine cards. I'm not a fan of this frame. It feels really lazy having the whole frame fade out right here, like halfway through the type line. At least they could have cut it off cleanly and, I don't know, cut out this part, have the black border curve up nice towards the edge, and then remove the whole top part. But then it would basically be the same as the full art Planeswalker one. I can see why they wouldn't have a actual full art card, because they commission these arts around 4x3 landscape, something like that. So there's not actually art that would be able to go down here. They can't stretch it. So for these cards, they'd basically just stretch the art a little bit larger and just fill in these areas, and then just have that lazy fade out right there. It seems really messy. There's definitely a cleaner way they could have done this, especially the line going around the type bar. Like, that should be complete. There's no reason that it should go around the text box like this and then have this little sliver right here that just starts only to fade out immediately. It just seems like this is a minorly modified version of the regular frame that has a lot of things overlooked in it. I'm not a fan of this one at all. It's cool to have a borderless card, but I'd almost rather have a normal card than that. I have no problem with the art going to the edges, but it should just be cleaner instead of a basic fade out. The showcase cards. This is a really good frame. It's honestly kind of strange how they have one of the best frames that they've ever done in the same set as one of the worst frames. This frame is possibly my favorite Magic frame that's ever been made. How they changed the shape of the type and title bars to have the pointed edges, how they reworked the lines to be these vines wrapping around it, and redoing the texture to look like a spellbook, but they still keep the mana cost colored in, and they apply this to the power and toughness box. There's almost no complaints I have about this frame at all. The only thing would be maybe I don't like that the stamp comes down and then curls back in. I think that the stamp, they should just move it back down like how it is on normal cards, but that's the only complaint I really have for this at all. I'm definitely going to be making my own rendition of this at some point. This is definitely my favorite frame that they've ever done. It's kind of a shame that the only cards that are in it are adventure cards. This one's definitely S tier. And the last one that I have is the Borderless Planeswalkers. These are much better than the other Borderless mess that they have, mostly because the Planeswalker arts, when they commission them, it's already full art, it's already vertical, so they can just make it a little bit larger and have art to fill in all the edges. So these ones, they actually can have these sides and the bottom all filled in. The only real complaint I have with this frame is that the bottom is not actually black. It's just they usually darken the art towards the bottom. There's a couple of them that just look sort of strange because the bottom of the art isn't actually that dark, so it's not as readable on these ones. But for this Garruk, it's good. And most of them, it's fine. They darken the art towards the bottom. Other than that, only complaint is that it's basically just the regular frame with elements cut out of it. There's nothing really unique about it, but it's definitely nice. I'm going to put it at a solid A. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not particularly special. Now, I'm sure there's some frames I missed and some things that I just didn't feel like were a big enough change to warrant putting in. And this is just my own opinion. I'm sure a lot of you will have problems with the full art cryptic command being at a C, whereas the feature site frame is an A. There's definitely things that could be debated in here, but this is just my personal opinion. I'm going to be making my own versions of some of these frames in the near future, mainly the Invocation, the Showcase, and possibly the Unglued and the Future Sight frames. Be looking out for that. Those are probably some of the next time lapses or tutorials that I'm going to be making. If you have any other ideas for videos you want to see, put them in the comments. I'll be reading all of them as usual. I'll see you in the next one.